Clever.
Compassionate.
Questioning.
Consultative.
Convincing.
Convicted. Rob Rinder. Malud, Maloud, Malive. Rob Rinder at Drive on Talk Radio.
Good evening, you're listening to Rob Rinder here on Talk Radio, the home of common sense, and on a day where this matters more than anything of truth, as Russia has invaded a sovereign nation, the Ukraine, and its people are trying to defend their capital city. We now go to America and Professor John Christopher Buer, White House correspondent at Real Political News. It's time to hear how the ever-changing situation is being received in America. Prof. JC, a lot to talk about. There is, as you have heard our discussions, perhaps in part, some concern that the sanctions that have been passed in Congress, although there doesn't appear to be joint and clear agreement, haven't gone anywhere near far enough to send a critical message to Vladimir Putin to stop his tanks rolling on Kiev.
Well, there are no sanctions as regarding this latest Putin move. Mm-hmm. There has been sanctions, and I think that's probably why Putin and Trump were so much very involved, and that what it had to do with Zelensky, and it goes back to getting Putin supporting Trump in 2016. There are no the Congress is not really in session at the moment, but what you're hearing is that the threat of sanctions. The threat of severe sanctions from the president, although he said he won't go after Vladimir yet. And there's also, about the SWIFT. There are some European countries that do not go along with the SWIFT
Germany.
Aspect of this. But, Biden said yesterday that he's frozen all Russian assets. There's a lot they can do, a lot we can do. The American people are not pleased. We don't like to see this dictator. The executive orders have been passed. They're in place. However, what we are concerned about, Rob, and I saw your very compassionate tweet this morning, and I joined in. I welcome people to join us on that. Mm-hmm. The people in Ukraine are suffering dreadfully because Vladimir Putin has defiled them, and he said, "You don't exist." Mm-hmm. And we see the images and we hear the reporting and the stories, and it's frightening. Now, the American people are really taking a look at this because not only is it affecting their economy and their price of gas, et cetera, but most Americans, if they're not lunatics of the MAGA types, care about each other and care about the world. This is a world problem. This isn't just a U.S., we're the greatest people problem. This is a compassionate problem that we have, and we haven't seen the likes of this since 1938. And we know we must not have another Neville Chamberlain Munich pact.
John Christopher Buer, I have to put the other side to it. It's part of my job. Now, there is an other side in this regard. Some people took the view that Donald Trump went on television and applauded Vladimir Putin. But what he certainly said was during his time, there was no invasion and it didn't happen. And that part of the reason that Putin has taken this opportunity to invade is because of the clear and unequivocal weakness of the West, demonstrating by, as you rightly describe, amongst other things, Germany, who's so reliant on Russian natural gas for its energy, that it has or appears to be, in any event, blocking the removal of Russia from SWIFT, allowing the critical survival of the Russian economy to continue. Now, looking at that, I understand that your President Biden, wants incremental sanctions, but this is a country in the form of Vladimir Putin who has clearly got a war chest together, close to $700 billion, knowing that he's going to be sanctioned and was ready for war. Bearing that in mind, how or why are incremental sanctions a way to approach this as opposed to the type of shock and awe sanctions that may have some effect?
Then you'll have nothing left to threaten him with. And I think you need to have another arrow in your quiver to say, okay, Vladimir, this is it. Now, what the people are terribly frightened of, and because Putin is really a madman. And he is saying things that are so outrageous, including talking about nuclear weapons. I mean, I lived through the Cuban Missile Crisis, and it was JFK versus Khrushchev. And they had a back door. They had a way to avoid total annihilation. And let's let's notice that what can happen if things really go awry is that we can, blast ourselves back into the Stone Age, and we may never recover.
Prof. JC, you said something before which I think is of critical relevance to our understanding here, which is the extent to which not just those who are politically engaged, as you'll be aware in this country, across party lines, there has been a united front, a clear joint statement from the Houses of Parliament on the horror and the denunciation of Russian aggression towards Ukraine. Looking at America, we wonder the extent to which, I'm going to use this language, the average American is affected by this. And you begun to refer to the fact that there is an economic cost for Americans, not least at the pump in gas prices. Is that the main reason that is that the main reason that Americans feel engaged in this story? Or does it, for the most part, feel like a nation far from the shores of America? And why should America carry on being the world policeman?
I think there's definitely that sentiment. What do we care about Ukraine? I never even heard about Ukraine. Well, I happen to know about Ukraine because my wife her grandmother was from Kiev. And I know you have relatives from that part of the world. And the fact that Putin called this a neo-Nazi movement is so anti-Semitic. It is so painfully cruel to people who have suffered both during the pogrom and the Holocaust, that it's shameful talk, and this must be called out. And then in the meantime, Donald Trump is saying that Putin is a genius, and he wish he could come over here and take care of our border wall problems. I mean, what is that about? And there are people who are with Trump, who are with Putin. They're very conservative talk television hosts that don't think there's anything wrong with Putin or the things that he's saying. And it is outrageous, Rob.
Mm-hmm. Well, the question that I really have is the extent to which, by and large, the American public, you referred to a tweet that I tweeted out before,
yes,
really feel a sense of interest, connection, and solidarity with the Ukrainian people. And part of the reason that might start to happen is if that has some influence, bearing in mind how interconnected we are globally in terms of our economy, on the lives, and I hate this language, but I'm going to use it, lived experiences day to day on the pocketbooks of the average American. Is that happening? Will that happen in America? And are most Americans talking about this as an issue that matters to them?
It's wall-to-wall coverage, Rob. There's nothing you can see except from one network, which we won't talk about. This is wall-to-wall. There's incredible reporting being done by some of the major cable and the regular news networks on what is going on in Kiev, what is going on in the south of Ukraine. And there's an extreme concern that Vladimir Putin will not stop, that he will go beyond the borders of Ukraine. I mean, he already has Belarus. They're his puppet.
Sure.
I mean, what's to stop him from going to the Baltics and let him try messing with Sweden and Finland? They showed him what for years ago. So we'll see. I mean, everyone should be concerned.
Prof. JC, again, it's quite clear, you're not somebody that hedges, or we don't exactly know the clarity of your mind and certainly your feelings toward Donald Trump. But there has been a lot of discussion, I put that mildly, that part of the reason that Putin has used this opportunity now is because there doesn't appear to be any joined up thinking and shared resolve in the West. And most especially, there doesn't seem to be either a single political figure or any sense of strength in terms of the leadership of the United States, the European Union, or its allies here in the UK. To what extent do you think President Biden has demonstrated the type of strength required to meet a foe like Vladimir Putin?
Well, we listen to him. We know he's committed. But there's also another movement going on. The old-time Republicans, the Eisenhowers, the Ronald Reagans, the Cold Warriors, even JFK, who was a Democrat. George W. Bush came out with an article. He spoke to the newspapers here, and imagine what his old man would say, G.H.W. Bush, because this is what real conservatives. I mean, can you imagine these Republicans like? I won't even mention their names, are siding with the commies. I mean, why don't you take a look at Dr. Strangelove and see how we considered Russians and communists, and Putin wants to he wants to take the country back to the old Soviet Union.
Prof. JC, can you be more specific? You're both calling out and describing positive noises from the Republican Party. Who are you referring to? Who has condemned the actions of Vladimir Putin?
George W. Bush, former president. There's quite a few.
Yeah.
Many members of former cabinet members of Bush,
yeah.
And they say that this is not who the Republicans were or the Republican parties were. Republican Party is, Ben Sasse, Chuck Hagel, former Secretary of Defense. He was in 2 different administrations. There is a real feeling of unbelievable questioning of what has this country become, and how have we let our country, as you always have said, should be the leader, and has always been the leader of I hate the word, the free world. And now, because of what we've had in the last 4 years and the connection to Putin, who has manipulated everything. I mean, he already took the U.S. I mean, his GRU has already infiltrated and divided and caused social
we could end up down that rabbit hole, and you may or may not be right. It's a subject of certainly, as you know, congressional investigation.
They won't even let that go on.
We would be here for some time. What is clear, exactly as you say, that and I think where you and I share common ground, is that Vladimir Putin and those who would support him have manipulated, understood that this was a time to attack, not least because of the way in which we, amongst ourselves, have never been more divided in the West, both in terms of your great national leadership and all of the critical European allies, those who have fought and stood for freedom, both in history and for today. And
this is an election year. All of Congress, all of the House of Representatives, and a third of the Senate are up in November. And I think the timing is extraordinarily interesting that Putin chose to invade Ukraine at this moment, because he knows that Biden would have a tough time getting his party elected if there was a full war going on. And I think that's probably what was coordinated. He would like nothing more than to get Trump back so he can get rid of those sanctions, so he can get his oligarchs back to Belgravia and living the high life in Miami Beach as well.
Well, some people would argue that those sanctions existed during the time of Donald Trump, and we could have that knocked down, drag out for some time. But nevertheless, we've run out of time, and it's always insightful to hear from you. Thank you, Prof. JC. Stay well, stay safe. Wherever you are, you're listening to me, Rob Rinder, on a day of tragedy, on a day of infamy, on a moment at a time in 2022 where a nation not dissimilar from ours, in reaching distance of our home, is under attack. You're listening to Rob Rinder. This is Talk Radio.
Bold Talk. Talk Radio.
Listen on your smart speaker.
Watch it live on your smart TV.
The world headquarters of common sense.